UFC Fight Night Adesanya versus Imavov goes down this weekend in Saudi Arabia. Guys, this card on paper is one of the most stacked fight night cards I think that we have ever seen. The UFC absolutely pulled out all the stops here. We know when they go to Saudi Arabia, when they go to Abu Dhabi, they roll out the red carpet. They stack these cards regardless of whether it's a fight night or a pay-per-view. I'm really excited for this card, right? And not only am I really excited for the card, I believe there's a lot of underdogs on this card that are going to get the job done. So we'll discuss all of that in this video. I'm going to be giving my breakdown and prediction for every single fight on the card. I will put the time codes down below. But man, I'm excited for this, guys. In the main event, Adesanya coming off of a loss to Dricus du Plessis, yet we saw some good things from Izzy in that fight. And it's like, does he still have it? Does he still have that championship grit left in him? Because he's one of the greatest that we've ever seen at 185 pounds. He's going in there against a surging contender on an absolute tear right now in Nassourdine Imavov that seems to be hitting his stride. And then in the co-main, Shara Bullet MVP, Striker's Delight matchup. That's a banger. And just really good fights all over the card. And this is looking better than UFC 312, right? Which is the pay-per-view event happening a week later. So, I mean, this is crazy, right? UFC 312 to me is just kind of a disgrace at that point. But nonetheless, man, one thing I am bummed about this card, we were supposed to have Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. That fight unfortunately fell apart. I was really looking forward to that, right? Ikram coming off of that KO loss to Robert Whittaker. I was excited to see if he could bounce back against a very game opponent in Andre Muniz. I thought that was very interesting stylistically. But this card, man, super excited to break this down. Let's waste no more time. Hop right into this, starting with our very first fight of the evening between Abdul Karim Al-Sewady and Balaji Oki. This is an interesting fight to start the night because with Balaji Oki, I picked him in his last time out against Chris Duncan, right? And obviously he didn't get the job done. And this was one of those fights to where what we've seen from Oki since he's came into the UFC, right? His first fight was here against Timmy Kiwamba. And okay, so he goes out there and gets a split decision. But really what had everyone kind of talking was this nasty KO finish over Dylan Salvador on the Contender Series, right? Anytime you go on the Contender Series, you get a crazy finish, you put on a great performance, you're going to kind of take the MMA world by storm. You're going to get people talking about you, having high expectations coming into the UFC. And what we saw kind of stagnant a little bit, right, in this performance here. But again, I give guys a pass when they're coming off the Contender Series and you get that first UFC test. You're not always going to see the best of these guys, right? There's the nerves involved. They're fighting maybe the best opponent of their career. And Oki's one of those guys coming in. I'm like, look, this guy's dangerous. He's powerful. He moves forward. He's got big power in his hands. And that's what we saw prior to getting to the UFC, right? Finishes, going out there, putting a beating on a lot of guys. And that's what he was known for. But in the Chris Duncan fight, I was just surprised, right? And it felt like to me, he kind of had this chip on his shoulder, right? Everyone was talking about the striking, the power, and, he's like, well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to go in there and grapple and try to prove a point. And to me, that was not the way to approach this fight, because if Chris Duncan was going to find a way to win, I thought that it was going to be the grappling, right? So to see Oki go in there and entertain the grappling, while he did have some success, right? We got to give Oki credit there. He had some success. I thought that if he kept the fight at range, if he kept the fight on the feet, back Duncan up against the fence and let his hands fly, I thought Oki could have possibly have found a finish or at least outstruck him and outscored him and won the fight against Duncan. So to me, this was a devastating loss, right? I know it's early on. I know he's still young in the game and he's kind of finding his footing inside the UFC. That was a very winnable matchup, right? One that he should have won, and I think that's something that he's going to learn from coming into this matchup, because anytime you get submitted by guillotine, right, people are going to say, well, that's concerning. You shouldn't be getting submitted by that as a professional fighter. This isn't a jiu-jitsu match. Two, this isn't a grappling match. This is a fight, right? Things happen, unfortunate things happen. You get caught and stuff. Shit happens. So I'm not faulting him for getting submitted by a guillotine, but it's the fact of how he approached the fight that is concerning to me, because Abdul Karim Al-Sewady, he is coming off of a loss, right, where he got finished with some, finished with some ground strikes. It was a nasty finish. That concerns me, right? Because whenever you're someone who you go out there and you get finished, what do we see when you come back? Are you going to be the same guy? Are you going to be a little hesitant? And this was his first real big loss inside the UFC, right? Because before that, he goes on the Contender Series. Very impressive decision win over George Hardwick, who I thought George Hardwick, very game opponent, good shots to the body, mixes things up well. I thought Hardwick was a very game opponent, very solid win by Abdul, and then before that, fighting over in Fury, picking up some decision wins, getting some finishes with ground and pound. And that's what I like about Abdul in this matchup, is he's someone who, from what I've seen, yes, he had some adversity there in the UFC early on, which is what's interesting, right? Because both guys early in the UFC here faced a little bit of adversity. I believe that Abdul Karim Al-Sewady and his team trains over at Fortis MMA. They're going to come in with a game plan here. They're going to take a look at the Chris Duncan fight, and they're going to say, look, if we mix things up, if we don't just stand in front of Oki, if we make him grapple, if we grapple, mix things up, and just don't stand in front of this guy, we rely on our skill set more than he does, and we will find a way to get this thing done. Because I believe Abdul is the better, more well-rounded mixed martial artist. The problem for him is Oki is dangerous power. So if Oki is going to win this fight, I mean, he could absolutely go out there and starch Abdul early on and get him out of there. But I do believe that Abdul comes in intelligent, mixes things up, looks to grapple, and looks to wear on Oki and take him into the deeper waters and just kind of wear on this guy. This is going to be one of those kind of dirty, grimy type of fights if Abdul is going to win, where if Oki's going to win, keeps the fight at range, keeps him at the end of his strikes, backs him up against the fence, and maybe he tries to entertain the grappling. I don't know that we see that considering what happened in the Chris Duncan matchup, but this is my first underdog fight on this card where I absolutely think Abdul could get the job done. I completely understand why people would pick Oki to win this fight because of the power. He's dangerous, but coming off of what we saw against Chris Duncan, I'd like to see a little bit more first before I pick him again, because I like the skill set of Karim Al-Sewady. I like the way he mixes things up. I like the way that he understands how to implement the grappling intelligently. That's why I'm picking Abdul to win this fight. But I think this is a close one either way. Moving on up to the heavyweight division. This is a very interesting fight right here between Hamdy Abdul Wahab and Jamal Pogues. This is an interesting fight, right? Because Hamdy, guy with a very credentialed, I believe, Greco-Roman wrestling background. He's got outstanding wrestling. He's a powerful guy. He's big. He's strong. And he's someone that's willing to throw down, right? Normally when you see these heavier guys that are grapplers, they just like to kind of take you down, lay on you, whatever. That is not Hamdy. He will go in there, he will, point down at the canvas, and he will just let things fly. And I think that could be a problem for him in this matchup. I don't expect that we're going to see that kind of Hamdy in this matchup, because Jamal Pogues, he's kind of a sniper, right? I'm not saying that he's like a world-class striker or anything, but he's got good striking, right? And from what we've seen from Hamdy, he hasn't been able to get out of his own way, right? He's had some suspensions, he's had some issues going on there. And, in his most recent outing, 2.5 years ago, basically, right, against Don'Tale Mayes, and I thought this was a pretty impressive showing inside of his debut, because while, Don'Tale Mayes is not the greatest guy in the heavyweight division, he's still a pretty game opponent. He's been around. He's got a lot of UFC experience. That's a pretty, I'd say, challenging debut inside the UFC. And also with Hamdy, he's fought on Jorge Masvidal's promotions. He's a guy that is used to the spotlight. He's used to having pressure on him. Goes out there, gets a nasty finish over Matthew Strickland, gets a KO victory over Tyler Lee, goes out there, gets a finish against Dustin Clements, and then gets a decision win over Justin Smith. So very young in the MMA game, but with a very extensive background competing when it comes to the grappling. So Hamdy is not, yes, he's newer to MMA, has a lot of experience when it comes to combat though, and then on the other side, Jamal Pogues is dangerous, right? He's a guy that likes to kind of sit at range. He likes to fight behind, the good combinations, good straight shots down the middle. And he's coming off a decision win over Thomas Peterson, right? And I think this was one where I'm like, okay, decent win there. Then he goes out and he loses to Mick Parkin, who, by the way, Mick Parkin, one of the guys on the rise in the heavyweight division, one of the prospects on the rise. So not a bad loss there, right? And then before that, we get to see a lot of decisions from Jamal Pogues. And he's a guy, he could go out there, pick you apart, and he's got good striking. The problem I have with Jamal in this fight, he doesn't really finish people, right? And I know that he has power. This is heavyweight and all it takes is one shot and all those kinds of things. But when you're kind of playing the stick and move, poke and pry type of fight, I think that's going to be an issue against a guy in Hamdy Abdul Wahab. While I think Hamdy has been away for a while, I believe that he is dangerous, man. He's aggressive. He's a powerhouse. He's he's just a game opponent, man. And the fact that he has that, high-level credentialed, background when it comes to the grappling, and the fact that he's not afraid to slug it out on the feet, that's a dangerous guy. And I think if someone's going to finish the fight, while Hamdy does get a little bit reckless, I think if he mixes in the grappling, pushes Jamal up against the fence, pressures him, lands some of those big power shots that makes Jamal hesitant and resort to kind of his pick and poke style, I absolutely see a scenario to where Hamdy can win a decision here. Could he finish Jamal? Absolutely. I could also see Jamal landing some good shots and finding a way to kind of get Hamdy out of there. But I believe if Hamdy mixes things together, mixes in the grappling, blends the striking with it as well, I think he wins on the judges' scorecards and finds a decision in this matchup. Moving on to Bogdan Grad versus Lucas Alexander. Interesting fight right here, right? Because in the UFC, guys, I talk about this all the time. Whenever we get prospects, right, we get these guys on the rise who it's like they did some good things, right? We've seen Bogdan go in there on the Contender Series, wins a split decision. This guy's game, right? He's got good grappling. He's fun on the feet. Like he's a game opponent, and he's just kind of a dude that could take damage. He's got that dog type of attitude when it comes to fighting, and he's someone that he's dangerous. Like I said, he's got submissions on his record. He can finish you no matter wherever the fight takes place, and that is very encouraging whenever you're going to pick somebody like that. What concerns me is this. Whenever we see guys new in the UFC, they get their first test, right? And it might, Lucas Alexander is not a world beater, but he's got some experience, right? He's been around for a little while, goes out there. Yes, he loses this matchup, goes out there. He beats Steve Peterson by decision, goes out there, loses to Joe Anderson Brita. That's a pretty game opponent, right? And then he goes out there prior to getting to the UFC. He's got finishing ability. He's got quick striking. He's a quick, kind of twitchy guy. And that is concerning for me on the side of Bogdan coming into this matchup. But I believe Bogdan Grad, while he does get hit, while he does wear some damage and is willing to kind of get into that firefight type of matchup, I believe that is how he can melt a guy like Lucas Alexander. While I think Lucas has the attributes to be a good fighter, he's athletic, he's up and down, right? It's kind of like this. It's a roller coaster with Lucas Alexander. And what I've seen from Bogdan, I've been very impressed. The power, the tenacity, and this aggressive attitude, and a guy that when I look at him and I watch him fight, I'm like, this is a guy that wants it. And I understand that it is a little concerning, right? I'm sweating on it a little bit, right? Because whenever we see these guys make their debut and they get their first test, even if it's not a world beater like Lucas Alexander, he still has the experience. And we see this happen all the time where these guys come off the Contender Series and they lose that first fight in the UFC. Like we just saw that with Bosch. It happens all the time, but I think Bogdan Grad is a little bit different. I think he's tenacious. He has quite a bit of experience prior to getting to the UFC, and I just like his dog attitude. He has finishing ability on the feet, on the ground. I got Bogdan Grad getting a finish, a TKO stoppage in round number 2. I think it's kind of a good back and forth. Maybe Lucas lands some shots in the first round, but eventually Grad will find the finish. Maybe he hurts him on the feet, maybe he subs him on the ground. I got a TKO stoppage coming in round number 2 for Bogdan. Moving on to the women's flyweight division, we have Jasudavicius and Mayra Bueno Silva. This is interesting to me, right? And I know a lot of people, WMMA, I don't care. Like, to me, I really like this fight, right? This is one of those matchups, when I see it on paper, I'm really intrigued, right? Because Mayra Bueno Silva is someone that had kind of been there, done that, in her division. Now she's moving down to the flyweight division. And I'm like, okay, so whenever you see a fighter go from bantamweight down to flyweight, even when we're talking about men's MMA, it just doesn't work out a lot, guys. It just doesn't. If you look at the track record, Garbrandt, Dillashaw, Johnson just got exposed going down from bantamweight to flyweight. For whatever reason, that 35 to 25 cut seems to affect people, right? Maybe it's the flyweights are just that much faster, and they are, right? They're very skilled. But I think there's something to be said about that, because while Mayra Bueno Silva is powerful and she is big and does have some power on the feet, I'm just looking at what we've seen so far, right? She goes out there against Macy Chiasson. She gets stopped, from the cut there. Some good ground and pound from Macy. Goes out there against Raquel Pennington, loses by decision. Okay, so she lost to Raquel Pennington. That was a awful fight, by the way, incredibly boring. Goes out there, gets a submission, standing submission over Holly Holm. And then before that, she's got very, very good submission skills, which is the good thing about Mayra Bueno Silva. But what I have a concern about is we always see these lighter skilled fighters, the fighters that are then coming up, or if you're moving down to their division. I just think that Mayra is not going to be as fast as Jasmine. I think Jasmine is someone that has very, very good grappling. So do I think she can negate the grappling of Bueno Silva? I mean, I don't know about negate it, but I think that she can stay safe when it comes to the submission threat that Mayra brings to the table. And what we've seen from Jasmine so far, I've been very impressed, right? She goes out there against Ariana Lipski, goes out there, gets the Darce, then goes out there, beats Fatty McCline by submission. That's a good win, right? Klein's got good grappling. Goes out there against Priscilla, finds another submission. And then, yes, she did lose to Tracy Cortez. That's a little alarming, right? Because I think Tracy Cortez isn't that great of a fighter. I think a lot of it is, we all know why they're marketing Tracy Cortez. It's not because of her fighting abilities. And then before that, goes out there and beats Miranda Maverick. Miranda Maverick's a solid fighter, right? She's pretty well-rounded. So what we've seen from Jasmine, she's fast, she's technical, and when I say fast, she's a flyweight. Mayra's coming down, a weight class. I think she's going to have the speed advantage. She has decent striking on the feet, but I believe that the grappling of Jasudavicius in this matchup is going to be a problem for Mayra. While Mayra, absolutely, she has power. She's probably going to have the power advantage. She could land some shots and hurt her and maybe find a submission. I could absolutely see that happening for Bueno Silva in this matchup. But like I said, whenever you see these 35ers go down to 25, it doesn't work out. It just doesn't work out. And I think the skill set of Jasmine in the grappling kind of cancels out what Mayra does well to a degree. So that's why I am rolling with Jasmine in this matchup. I think she's good. I think she's well-rounded, especially when it comes to the grappling. I got Jasmine getting this one done by decision. Moving on to one of the fights that when I saw this get announced, not everyone's going to jump and go, woohoo! But to me, this is one that made me go, woohoo! I got really excited for this fight because Firas Ziam, this dude's a savage, right? He's got outstanding striking. He's fun to watch. He's a rangy guy in the division, 6'1", 75-inch reach, but he's going in there against a very, very game opponent in Mike Davis, who I think a lot of people forget about Mike Davis. This dude is an absolute savage. I remember watching him on the Contender Series where he fought Sadiq Youssef. That might have been the greatest Contender Series fight of all time. I feel like that just flies under the radar and people forget about it. I mean, both dudes, they were in there slugging it out. It was a back and forth war. Both guys hurt each other. It was an unbelievable back and forth. And outside of that right there, we have seen some really, really good things from Mike Davis, right? He got submitted by Gilbert Burns. Okay, Gilbert Burns at the time, world class, back when he was really making his run inside the UFC. When Gilbert was down at 155, then goes out there, gets a finish over Thomas Gifford, goes out there, beats Mason Jones by decision, beats Vyacheslav Borshov, and then is coming off of a very impressive submission over Natan Levy, who I don't think Natan Levy's that good, but it was the way that Mike Davis put it together, right? He showcased his grappling because a lot of people, I think, forget Mike Davis, he has boxing experience. He has outstanding boxing, really good head movement, really good hands, really good power, really good combinations. But it's been the evolution in the grappling that I think makes it really interesting when it comes to Mike Davis. But what concerns me for Mike in this fight is this. Firas Ziam, he's firing on all cylinders, right? He goes out there. I was like, I don't know about Ziam, man. He's going out there. He's not really finishing people, kind of picking and poking his way to some decisions. Goes out there, shuts me up, gets a nasty finish when it shuts me up in terms of when it comes to finding finishes. Goes out there and absolutely destroys Matt Frevola, which again, Matt Frevola, kind of a journeyman type of guy, but he's game, right? Matt Frevola, he's game, right? He kind of fights some of these good up-and-comers in the division and loses. We saw that against Saint-Denis, but he's still dangerous, right? And he's a game opponent, so that's a big win by Ziam. Goes out there, gets a split decision win over Claudio Puelles. Puelles, not the greatest guy, right? But he's got a submission threat, right? He's a dangerous grappler. That's his bread and butter. So we got to see some improvements when it came to the grappling of Firas Ziam, which that was very encouraging to me, right? Because that's 11 months ago. We've seen some improvements there. And before that, just a guy, right? If you're going out there and going back and forth and winning a unanimous decision over Jai Herbert when it comes to the striking, that's impressive, right? People forget that Jai Herbert, I mean, he basically gave Ilia Topuria one of his hardest fights. He's like the only guy that's really hurt Ilia since he's been in the UFC, basically, right? Remember that high kick he landed on Topuria? Jai Herbert, slick striker, Firas Ziam went in there and absolutely put it on him. So what we've seen from Ziam since he's been in the UFC is improvement. He's 27 years of age. He's taking this serious. And the thing with Mike Davis, I like his attitude. He's kind of nonchalant. He does kind of some gaming and this and that. He teaches, striking stuff. And I like Mike Davis. I really like watching the guy fight. I'm concerned for him in this matchup, considering from what we have seen from Firas Ziam. And with Mike, he's been he's competed, he's been active, and then he gets some time away. And then, so it's kind of been a struggle in terms of activity for Mike Davis. Like, look here, right? So he wasn't super active before that. 4 years, took some time away, comes back, basically 2 years later, and now here he is. Like, so it's, again, that's kind of been the pattern with Mike Davis. There hasn't been a ton of activity. Where with Ziam, we're seeing he's active, he's improving, his striking is dangerous, and if Mike Davis is very tough, right? He's got good boxing, he's very good on the feet. We saw him implement the grappling, and I think that is what he's going to look to do in this matchup, because if he stands in front of Ziam, I could see Firas landing some nasty shots at range and having a good back and forth with Mike Davis. But I think this is a really good fight either way. I could see a finish in this fight, but I think we see a good back and forth to where maybe Davis tries to mix in the grappling. I just don't know how much success he has, considering how much Ziam has leveled up, at least what it looks like in the grappling. I think the striking of Ziam is going to be faster. He's going to mix things together in terms of on the feet. I think he finds a way to get a decision in this matchup. But I absolutely could see Davis getting this one done by mixing things together, letting his hands fly, maybe even finding a finish. But I think Ziam is hungry. He's active. He's the one that kind of has the momentum rolling right now. I'm going Firas Ziam by decision. Moving on, we have Terrence McKinney versus Damir Hadzovic. Weird fight, man. Weird fight here because I like Terrence McKinney. I like T-Rex, man. He's a guy that he's got a fun style, right? He goes out there in the first round. He's a speedy-handed southpaw. He's got crazy power in that left hand. And that's what we've seen from in his UFC career, right? I mean, Terrence McKinney, he's had a weird career, right? Goes out there, gets a highlight reel KO'd by Bonfim, goes out there, gets submitted by Nazim, goes out there, nasty KO over Mike Breeden, goes out there, gets another nasty KO over Brendan Mariota, and then goes out there and gets flatlined by Esteban Rivovic. So the pattern for T-Rex has been, well, he goes out there, gets a highlight reel finish, then he becomes a highlight reel finish, and it's kind of been this back and forth ping pong game with him. So he's hard to trust, right? He's hard to trust. And if McKinney went in there, it's kind of like the Michael Chandler thing, right? Not as bad, but McKinney has good grappling. He's got pretty good wrestling. He's got some decent submissions, but we don't really see him use it, right? He goes in there, he kind of just wants to show that he's a striker, rely on his speed and power on the feet, and he opens up the opportunity for him to get caught. And he's a guy that his chin is wet, man. He has been knocked out several times. I know he went in there, he's landed some nasty shots, he's had some great finishes, and it concerns me, right? Because while Damir Hadzovic is not a world beater, right? 38 years of age, seems like he's a little bit on the decline here, right? Came out, gets a win over Reyes, and then he lost to Christos Giagos, loses to Renato Moicano by submission. That's 4 years ago, right? And then he's only had 2 fights over the past 4 years. He loses or gets the win over Yancy Medeiros by decision, and older Yancy Medeiros. And then he's losing to Mark Jacasey by decision. That's 2.5 years ago, right? So he hasn't been very active. He's 38 years of age. To me, this looks like a fight to where Terrence McKinney, you got to remember, he's active. He takes fights when the UFC asks him to step in, short notice or not, whatever. He is always willing to step up to the plate. The UFC rewards that. They thank you for that. And I believe coming off of that loss to Esteban Rivovic, we are going to see Terrence McKinney look sharp. I think that he is going to be aggressive early on. Now, Damir, he's tough, right? So to rely on a finish early on, I mean, it's going to be tough to do that, but I think if Terrence is going to get the job done, I think he comes out aggressive. I think that Damir has been inactive while McKinney, even though he's lost some fights along the way, he's active. He's a guy that's game, and he's got very, very dangerous striking early on in the fight. And I believe that when he lands on Damir, as tough as Hadzovic is, I don't think he's going to be able to take the shots of Terrence McKinney early on. But I wouldn't be surprised if Hadzovic tries to storm up against the fence, wear on McKinney a little bit, and then get into that second, third round to where he could eventually find a shot and get McKinney out of there. I don't think it happens. I think the UFC is trying to give as much of a layup as they possibly can to McKinney as kind of a thank you for being active, thank you for being so game and putting on, some of these fights. I think McKinney finds a finish in the first round over Damir. Damir's older, been inactive, seems like he's on the decline to me. If you're losing to Mark Jacasey, who by decision at that point in time, that's just not very good, right? And what I've seen from Damir, I think Terrence McKinney can take advantage early in the fight and find a finish early on. But if McKinney mixes in the grappling, things kind of play out a little bit. I can maybe see him winning a decision. But from what we've seen from Terrence, the explosiveness in the beginning, I think it's going to be too much for Damir. Moving on to Shamil Gaziev versus Thomas Peterson. Interesting fight, right? Because with Shamil Gaziev, he's a guy that I mean, he seems unstoppable at heavyweight, right? And what I mean by unstoppable, I don't mean at the top of the division. I mean towards these prospects on the rise, these guys towards the back end of the rankings. I think they are going to all struggle with Shamil, because what we've seen from Gaziev is he's got good grappling, he has good wrestling, and his striking, it's pretty good, right? On the feet, he has an ability to back guys up, keep the pressure on, get the boxing going, and finds a way just to get to guys. And we saw that in his most recent outing against Don'Tale Mayes. Okay, so yeah, it's Don'Tale Mayes, and no one really gives Mayes any credit. He's a UFC veteran. He's a guy that's been around. He's got a wealth of experience. He's got decent hands, right? He's got decent hands, and we saw Shamil mix things together, right? And that's what I like about Shamil, is he has the ability to feint level changes, set up the boxing, and he understands how to weaponize his skill set. But really what it was encouraging to me in this fight is he learned from this loss to Jairzinho Rozenstruik, because from what we saw from Shamil prior to that, everything was just going his way, right? Rattling off wins, going out there, finishing Martin Buday, getting the submission on the Contender Series, and before that, going out there and finishing Darko Stosic, who used to be in the UFC. So it's been an impressive run for Shamil, and then he goes out there against Rozenstruik, and it kind of halted the momentum, right? He was kind of there for a little while, and then he got tired. And then if you get tired in front of a game guy like Rozenstruik, it's going to be a problem, which is exactly what happened. But I believe Shamil has learned from that fight. And I think that that's the big difference, because what we've seen from Thomas Peterson, okay, so he gets a decision over Mo Usman. Mo Usman, to me, I don't think he's that good, right? I think his striking's atrocious, has decent wrestling. I don't think he's that good. Throws big windmill shots. I just don't think very highly of Usman as a fighter. Goes out there, loses to Jamal Pogues, got, picked and poked by Jamal there. But before that, found the submission on the Contender Series, which is what got him the contract. Goes out there and he's finding some finishes over in LFA. So it's possible that Thomas could go in there and pull this off, because, again, if you have finishing ability, especially at heavyweight, all it takes is one shot. But I think Shamil has learned from the Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight. I think he's in a little bit better condition than what he was before in terms of physically. He looks a little bit leaner to me. I believe he relies on the boxing, the pressure, backs Thomas up against the fence, keeps him guessing, blends everything together, tires him out, and ultimately finds a finish in the third round. I could see it being earlier than that. I could also see a decision here, but I think he finds a finish later on in the fight. I think maybe he takes Thomas down, is in a dominant position, and is just throwing a bunch of, ground and pound, some elbows to where the ref has to stop in and stop the fight. I think Shamil Gaziev learned a lot from the Rozenstruik loss. I think that he has made improvements since then, physically and technicality-wise. I have Shamil getting this one done by finish. Moving on, we have Muhammad Naimov and Khan Ofli. This is a straightforward matchup to me, right? From what we've seen from Muhammad Naimov, he's dangerous, right? Got good power in his hands. He's got good wrestling. He mixes things well together. He's coming off a loss, right? 7 months ago to Felipe Lima. Not a bad loss. I think Felipe Lima is a very game opponent, got finished by submission. Okay. But before that, was on an absolute tear. Goes out there and gets a finish over Eric Silva. Goes out there, beats Nathaniel Wood. That's a good win, right? Nathaniel Wood, pretty solid opponent, I would say. Goes out there and gets a nasty finish over Jamie Malarkey. That was the fight where I'm like, okay, we got something here with Muhammad. He's dangerous. He's got big power. And then before that, getting to the UFC, guy was a finishing machine. So that's what I like about Muhammad coming into this fight. Very, very dangerous power in his hands. Solid striking, solid grappling. And I look at Ofli and I'm like, how do you win this fight, right? I don't think he's a better striker than Muhammad. I don't think he has more power, right? So, that's kind of a disadvantage. What's he going to do? Come in and out-grapple Muhammad? I don't think so, right? And he's coming off of a finish loss to Marion Santos. So he's coming off of a finish. And we talk about this all the time, guys. Like, where is your head at when you come off of a finish? Are you going to be the same guy? Are you going to be hesitant and refuse to open up a little bit? Because I can tell you this right now. If Ofli comes into this and he does not open up and take chances, he's going to get destroyed in this fight by Naimov. And I see a lot of people here on Tapology feel the same way. That's exactly how I see it, right? And I know that Ofli does have solid grappling. He's getting a bunch of finishes, via submission before getting to the UFC. This is a different level, right? This is a different level, and you saw that, when he lost to Santos there, and then now you're facing Muhammad Naimov, who I think is probably even better. So how are you going to pick him to win this fight, right? Again, it's a fight. Anything can happen. He does have a good submission threat. I believe Muhammad Naimov and his striking are going to be the difference in this matchup. I think he stuffs the takedowns. If Khan tries to take the fight to the floor, keeps it on the feet, gets into that boxing range, and lands a nasty shot and puts Ofli out. I have Muhammad Naimov by second round finish. I could even see it happening early on maybe in the first round, but I'm going to go second round Muhammad Naimov by finish. Moving on to a very interesting matchup here. I can't wait for this fight, man. In the bantamweight division, we have Said Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. Vinny Oliveira, I like to call him. This is an interesting fight because what we've seen from Vinny Oliveira, I mean, he seems like he has the it factor, right? He's, coming out of Brazil. He's got the fun striking style. He's got, the showboating. He's got the, come on, man, look at me. He's got that attitude. And the UFC loves that, right? It's easy to market. He's fighting out of Brazil. There's been a lot of great fighters on the rise for Brazil. And there's been this Brazilian push and wave in MMA recently. And Vinny Oliveira, he's one of those guys on the rise. He's got dangerous calf kicks. He's got very, very good striking. He's got crazy knees. He's a dangerous opponent. And on the other side, Said Nurmagomedov, I believe, is the better overall mixed martial artist. But is that going to be enough, right, to take on this solid guy on the rise in Vinny Oliveira? Because what we saw from Oliveira against Ricky Simón, I was beyond impressed because I thought that this was one of those moments to where the grizzled vet in Ricky Simón, who's got the grappling, his striking's not the best, but he's got a good blast double. He understands how to weaponize the grappling, especially against these younger guys, to where Ricky can kind of take advantage of that. And I thought it was going to be a little bit of a problem for Oliveira in that fight. Not at all. Vinny Oliveira went in there and absolutely destroyed Ricky Simón, was landing some nasty calf kicks. He hurt himself because I think one of them got checked by Ricky in that matchup. I'll have to go back and check that spot out again, but I'm pretty sure it was a check kick. So as long as kicks aren't getting checked, Oliveira's landing nasty, devastating leg kicks that hinder your movement. He was doing that to Ricky Simón, picking him apart, landing good shots at range. And then before that, the nasty flying knee KO over Bernardo Sapai, who, Bernardo Sapai just got back at the wig column, solid fighter, training over at All Stars. He's a very game opponent. So if you're going out there and getting a finish over him, that is going to get my attention at least, right? And then on the Contender Series, the nasty left hook KO, he is a very dangerous opponent. But the thing about Oliveira, when he loses, he gets finished, right? And you can see on here his last time he lost, he got finished, right? And that is something that does concern me about Vinny Oliveira because with Said Nurmagomedov, he's got good submissions, right? He's got solid grappling. He's solid on the feet. And that's what I like about this matchup for Said Nurmagomedov. While I think Vinny Oliveira, he's exciting, he's got good striking, Nurmagomedov's not just going to stand in front of him. He's going to keep him guessing. He's going to mix in the grappling. He's going to threaten with submissions. And he's going to give Oliveira a lot to think about. And this loss right here to Jonathan Martinez, that's a little concerning, right? Because does Jonathan Martinez kind of have a little bit of a similar skill set to Oliveira? I think so, right? I know Martinez has devastating leg kicks, right? Which, Oliveira doesn't have as good, but, he showed against Ricky Simón, he's got really good leg kicks. So if he can attack the legs of Said, that could definitely be a problem for Nurmagomedov in this fight. But before that, you've seen the submission threat of Nurmagomedov and the way that he is able to control guys with the grappling, threaten with submissions, mix in the striking. I just think that is going to be a little bit too much for Vinicius Oliveira in this matchup. While I think Oliveira is fun to watch, he's got an exciting style, he taunts, he's, got the personality, he's got the swag to him. I just don't know that that's enough to go in there and beat Nurmagomedov in this fight. I think that, again, Vinny Oliveira is still early in his UFC career. He's got a lot of hype right now, right? And I think that this is the first solid all-around opponent that he has fought. Now, I know Bernardo Sapai, very solid opponent as well, but I think Nurmagomedov is better than Bernardo. And again, he got caught by a flying knee, did Bernardo in that matchup. So as long as Said doesn't get hit with some nasty flying knee or some sort of highlight reel shot that Vinny could throw his way, I think Nurmagomedov mixes the striking, the grappling together, and wins a decision here. I don't know, maybe he does find some sort of ground and pound or submission, considering that Oliveira's losses come by him getting finished because he's kind of that, killer be killed type of fighter. I think it's going to be by decision. I have Said Nurmagomedov getting it done. Moving on to a fight that I'm really excited for, this one between Sergei Pavlovich and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, I'm interested in this for a number of reasons. One, Biggie Boy's been on a tear, right? He goes out there and he loses to Alexander Volkov, gets finished, right? Alexander Volkov has shown he is absolutely one of the best heavyweights in the world, right? He's got outstanding striking. He's tall, he's rangy, he's difficult to deal with, and his grappling is really, really, really improved So when you fight Volkov, it's kind of hard to figure out a way to beat the guy because he's became so well-rounded. So, okay, he got finished, a little over 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago against Volkov. Goes out there, gets a KO victory over Chris Daukaus. Not a great win. Daukaus was in and out of the UFC, like a drive-through, like fast food, like a fast food line. He was in and out, man. So, goes in there, loses to a Jailton Almeida, very dangerous grappler. Okay, then goes out here and is riding a 2-fight win streak. Goes out there and gets a finished win over Shamil Gaziev to where it was a decent fight right until Shamil gassed, and then Jairzinho Rozenstruik, we just had the jab firing on all cylinders and was able to pick him apart. Then he goes out there and wins a decision over Tai Tuivasa. That shouldn't have been split. I thought it was unanimous. I don't know why it was a split decision, but now that I remember the horrible judging and that had everyone going crazy, Rozenstruik's been putting it together, right? He's a technical striker. He's got a good jab. He's got a good straight right hand behind it. He likes to do everything picture perfect. Everything's got to be very technical. He's got some good low kicks. He slides in and out of range. But the thing about Jairzinho, he's kind of stuck in the mud when it comes to the striking. I know everything looks perfect and he's got, this kickboxing background, but to me, he's too stationary for a guy like Sergei Pavlovich, because when Aspinall, because with Sergei, what we saw, yes, he lost to Alexander Volkov. Like I said, Volkov's he won that fight against Cyril Gane. Even though they gave Gane the decision, I thought Volkov won. Volkov's dangerous, long, tall, rangy. He's a hard matchup for a lot of guys, right? So that's who Pavlovich lost to. Then he goes out there against Tom Aspinall and gets finished. Aspinall's, basically the baddest man on the planet, right? We hopefully will get him versus John Jones here soon. But outside of that, he's been unstoppable, right? Goes out there, KOs Curtis Blades, goes out there, KOs Tai Tuivasa, KOs Derek Lewis. He has been finishing everyone in his path. And Sergei, he's probably my favorite heavyweight. I just like everything about him. He basically just pumps iron, wrestles a little here and there, and just basically boxes. And that's all this guy does. He trains, he works his ass off, and he is a big, strong dude. And I think if he shaves down a little bit of the size, right? I think he's still going to be a big guy. But if he shaves that down and works a little bit more on the speed, which from watching some of the training videos, that seems to be the priority in his camp. Be a little bit faster, be a little bit more nimble, and stop the news, man. Call the presses, because this guy threw a couple kicks in his last fight against Alexander Volkov, even though he didn't win the fight. So we're seeing a little bit of an evolution in the game of Sergei. Now, I think the problem for Rozenstruik is going to be the power. I don't think Jairzinho, while he has a good jab, he's technical, he kind of likes to pick and poke and play that back and forth kind of game. You can't do that against Sergei, right? And then people are going to say, well, Aspinall, he's got good technique. He was bouncing around and moving out of range. He had landed some good shots. But Aspinall's different. He's got crazy one-shot power, where Jairzinho, he has power, but it's not the same as Aspinall. He's not nearly as fast as Aspinall. He doesn't bounce in and out of range like that. While he's very technical, he's kind of stuck in the mud. And if you're stuck in the mud and you're just kind of casually getting out of the way and you're not very athletic, you're getting knocked out by Sergei, right? If you don't bring a lot to the table to keep him guessing and keep things, keep Sergei guessing, you're not winning. And I think Pavlovich comes out there with a point to prove. I don't think he's going to be hesitant at all. I don't think that he's really going to respect anything that Jairzinho is throwing his way. I think he walks through, the jab, lets some of the combinations fly, because Pavlovich, while he doesn't have this Ngannou-like power like everyone wants to make it seem, he still has unbelievable power to where when he lets those uppercuts fly, he lets those shots land, he could put anybody in the division out. I think Sergei Pavlovich gets back in the win column and gets a first-round finish over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I think he marches him down, has almost no respect for the power coming back his way from Rozenstruik. I think Pavlovich is able to get this one done. Moving on, co-main event of the evening. Very, very interesting fight between Shara Bullet and MVP, Michael Venom Page. Now, this is interesting matchmaking, right? Because MVP is a guy that's fought basically his entire career down at 170 pounds, from Bellator, coming over to the UFC. He's shown a lot of good things throughout his career, but one of the big weaknesses for MVP has been the grappling, right? If you have a grappling threat and you can kind of keep him guessing and you can kind of stall the fight and control him there, you can beat MVP. But if you stand in front of Michael Venom Page for, however long the fight is, good luck. There's not many guys that can beat this guy. And the only losses that we've really seen from MVP, at least of recent, goes out there and loses to Logan Storley by split decision. Logan Storley, he's a very, very high-level wrestler over in Bellator. So that's a guy that even Logan Storley at moments was having a little bit of a hard time kind of controlling MVP. That's how he won the fight. Wrestling, wrestling, wrestling. Then he goes out there and loses to Ian Machado Gary, which I figured that was going to happen if Ian was going to win this fight. I thought that if it was on the feet, MVP just always shows levels. He's got a very unpredictable, that in and out karate, kind of like he's surfing, bouncing in and out of range style. It's a puzzle. It's hard to deal with. And I think guys think they know until they're in there with MVP. And that's why Gary, he got hit with a shot. He's like, nope, I'm grappling. I'm not even dealing with this. And then the only other loss on MVP's record was that perfectly timed calf kick by a prime Douglas Lima to where he threw a perfectly timed uppercut right after that KO'd MVP. Outside of that, Michael Venom Page he's been like unstoppable, right? You've seen what he's been able to do over in Bellator. He got that one back against Douglas Lima. That was a close fight. Goes in there and gets the crazy leg kick stoppage there where he blew the guy's knee apart. Goes in there and absolutely beats the brakes off of Kevin Holland. So MVP's dangerous, right? He's got a powerful right hand. He doesn't really use much of a jab. He kind of slides in and out of range. He's very unpredictable. He holds his hands very low. But what we've seen from him is he's dangerous. He's aggressive when it comes to that, darting in and out style. And a lot of guys think they have an idea until they're in there with them. But if there's someone that could stand there and strike with them in the middleweight division, one of those guys is going to be Shara Magomedov. But I think if Shara is going to win this fight, if there's ever going to be a moment we see him grapple, it's going to be this fight. Because what we've seen from Shara since he's been in the UFC, been kind of questionable, right? Goes out there and he gets a decision win over Bruno Silva. Right? Goes out there, gets a finish over Antonio Trocoli, who that was a last minute, where Trocoli just had to fly across the world and step in for this fight. And, Shara was kind of doing some things, but it took him forever, to put him away. Then goes out there and beats Mikhail Olszewski, and it's like, and that just kind of worries me. And then he goes out there and gets the crazy spinning back fist, double spinning back fist highlight reel KO over Armen Petrosyan. And it's like, look, Shara's creative. He's got a very kick-heavy approach. And with the way that MVP keeps his hands low, of course, Shara could time some sort of creative setup, a crazy back fist. He could time him with a head kick or something like that. Absolutely. But I've been saying it for the longest time. You got to see it in the Mikhail fight a little bit. Someone with powerful boxing, someone that has a good straight right hand, or someone that can make him pay with the boxing defense deficiency is going to give Shara problems. I believe the first guy to give him true issues in the UFC is going to be MVP. If you stand in front of MVP, man, and that's just where the fight's going to be the whole time, he's too comfortable, he's too fast, and he will toy with you on the feet. And I know this is up a weight class for MVP. I don't think he cut too much weight. I mean, I don't know. He doesn't seem like, I know he's a tall guy. He's skinny, right? I don't think he's the biggest guy. So him being at 185, he will not have a lot of success in this division. Either of these guys, to be honest with you, right? I know they're exciting. They got fun striking styles. That's what this is, right? A fun striker's delight matchup. A good back and forth here. Both of these guys have so many holes when it comes to the grappling. And as good as middleweight is, I don't see either of these guys doing well in the top of the division. Make no mistake about it. Both are incredibly entertaining. I think Shara absolutely could land a shot, land a kick, time something, and KO Michael Venom Page. Don't think it's likely. We haven't seen it much inside of MVP's career. All of the extensive striking background, all the competitions, karate point style, whatever you want to say from MVP back in the day. This dude's different on the feet. He's fast. He's got a nasty right hand. He's got flying knees. He mixes things together. He keeps you guessing, and he snake charms you, right? He does the little Venom Viper thing, and that's how he fights, right? He's, darting in and out. You don't know what he's going to do, and next thing you know, you're waiting on MVP. But I think if Shara comes in, attacks the lead leg of MVP, tries to knock him off balance, set up a high kick or something, absolutely, I could see him landing a shot. I just don't think it happens. I like Shara Bullet. I would like to see him get this thing done. I just think MVP is that dangerous. I think he's that good. I think he's going to have a speed advantage, right? Going from 170 up to 85. I think he's going to carry that speed along with him. I think it's going to be a problem for Shara. If you're struggling with some of these other guys, and now you got one of the most dangerous strikers, one of the most dynamic strikers in MMA history, really, an MVP in front of you. I know MVP's old, right? I know he's getting up there. He's almost 38. He hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. The only way he slows down is if you mix in the grappling. So if Shara mixes in the wrestling and we get to see some newfound skills when it comes to that, sure, I think he could go out there and find a way to beat MVP. But if all they do is strike on the feet and Shara doesn't land some creative combination or time a perfect head kick, I believe MVP lands a nasty right hand down the middle. Some of those shots he was landing on Kevin Holland, some of the shots that he even landed on Ian Gary. I think one of those shots is going to hurt Shara Bullet to where we could see MVP find a finish in this matchup. Either way, very fun fight. I think this is a striker's delight matchup. If anybody's going to grapple, it's going to be Shara. Excited for this one. I think we see a finish either way. I'm riding with MVP to get this one done. And moving on to our main event of the evening between Israel Adesanya and Nassourdine Imavov. This is a very interesting fight. This is a very interesting fight for a number of reasons. Number one, we have Israel Adesanya who's coming off of 2 losses. Now keep in mind, those 2 losses are to 2 of the top guys in the division, right? A former champion in Sean Strickland who went in there, pulled off the big upset against Israel Adesanya. Izzy took some time away, and then he came back and fought the champion, the best guy in the weight class right now, and that is the champ in Dricus du Plessis. And Adesanya had a lot of success in this fight. I thought this was one of the better versions of Izzy that we have seen. He came in, he was mean, he was aggressive, and he was putting out a lot of volume as the fight played out. Even though he ultimately did get submitted by DDP, I thought Adesanya showed some really good improvements in terms of the boxing and the forward aggressiveness in his style in this matchup against Dricus. And I think that showed a lot about Izzy and where he is in his career, right? Because he's a guy who's 35 years of age, coming up on 36. That's kind of the time where it's like, look, Izzy, you've been there, done that. You've been the champion. You defended the title multiple times. You're one of the greatest, if not the greatest, middleweight of all time. You're one of the best strikers in the UFC. You're a big star. We get all that. But now it's at the point of, well, what's he fighting for? Does he want to get back to the title? Does he want to be that guy again? And you hear Adesanya say all the time, the belt's just kind of a thing. I like collecting heads. And that is what this is about, in my opinion, for Israel Adesanya. He wants to test himself against a surging contender in the middleweight division in Nassourdine Imavov, who absolutely is one of the most skilled guys in the weight class. He's got very good striking. He's fast. He's got very good wrestling. He's very, very technical. But what I struggle with Imavov is it's weird, right? Because he has good wrestling that we see at times. He's got good takedown defense, speedy hands, good movement on the feet. And I look at him, I'm like, this guy could be a champion. And then he goes out there against Brendan Allen, and it's like, right? I mean, yeah, he defended some takedowns well. We saw some impressive moments at times, but Brendan Allen looked kind of flat, right? And I know when you're going out there against Brendan Allen has underrated striking. I think he has better striking than what people want to give him credit for. He's got very, very good submissions, and Nassourdine negated all of that. The problem I have with Imavov is you just don't know which guy's going to show up. It's like 1 week the guy shows up, he kind of looks off on the feet. The next he goes out there, he's losing to Phil Halls. I mean, that takes skill to lose to Phil Halls, man. Like, how the hell that's just one of those losses on his record. I'm like, how'd you lose to Phil Halls? But, that's what I'm talking about Imavov, right? You go out there, he beats Jared Cannonier. This was a close fight, right? At times, Cannonier was having some moments. Imavov started to take over as the fight played out. We got a controversial stoppage, but Imavov was definitely taking over the fight at this point in time. Then he goes out there against Roman Dolidze. He landed a lot of good shots against Dolidze, and that was one of those matchups where you really got to see how fast Imavov is. The speed was on display, the timing, the footwork, and then, he was beating up on Chris Curtis until, the clash of heads, and then he went out there and lost to Sean Strickland. And I keep saying this, guys, you don't have to like Sean Strickland. I'm kind of with Sean Strickland. He says a lot of shit. I'm just like, whatever, man. And, and that's what he does. He talks a lot of, says a lot of crazy things to get people to tune in because his fighting style, it's not the most entertaining, right? He says, I'm going to go to war. And he goes in there and jabs and teeps, for 25 minutes. And that's kind of what we pick on him for. But even though Strickland pisses me off, you have to give him credit. The guy has a very weird style that gives these pretty stylish strikers a world of problems. And it's the way he checks the kicks, the way he throws the jab, the way that he is very defensively responsible. He doesn't open up enough, which is hence the jab and teep fest. He doesn't give these strikers the opportunities to counter, right? And that's what Adesanya ran into. That's what Imavov ran into. So they both lost to Sean Strickland. I mean, it's kind of crazy that Strickland has wins over these guys. But so I don't hold that so much against these guys because I've said that before, that Sean has a weird ability to make these pretty stylish strikers struggle. But for me, guys, this is relatively simple. if Israel Adesanya shows up, this isn't a pay-per-view. It's not the big limelight. Yes, it's still a big card. It's a fight night in Saudi Arabia. It's decked out. This is a big card. Make no mistake about it. But it's not the pay-per-view headliners. There's no title on the line. There's none of those things, which it feels weird that we're getting a fight like this that has Izzy a part of it because it's been so long since we've seen it. But I believe if Adesanya shows up and looks anything like he did against Dricus Du Plessis, he absolutely wins this fight. And that is why I'm going with Israel Adesanya to beat Nassourdine Imavov by decision. Throughout the time that I've seen Imavov fight, I'm telling you right now, the guy is very skilled. He's got good speed, good striking, very solid wrestling. He's got good takedown defense. From what I've seen, I can't count on him to go in there and he's supposed to go in here and take out a former champion. Was he going to knock him out? I mean, he could hurt him, right? I know that he's got good striking and stuff, but Israel Adesanya, if you're going to stand and kickbox in front of that guy for 25 minutes, not many guys can do that, right? And we've seen how good Alex Pineda is. Izzy outstruck Pineda, right? He was beating Alex Pineda the first time around until Alex landed the shot. Then in the second fight, Alex was having a lot more success early, but Izzy was able to find him with a shot. And yes, he lost to Sean Strickland. Was it, Izzy was kind of just coming into that fight and just kind of coasting, and Strickland kind of woke him up a little bit? Sure, you could go with that. I think that was some of it, but I also think that Strickland just kind of shut him down. And then he goes out there against DDP and puts on, even though he lost, I thought it was an impressive performance, man. I thought it was. He looked aggressive. He had an angry look in his eye, and he was landing some nasty shots to the body on DDP. And when I ask myself, okay, so he lost to the champion and the number one ranked guy in the world. Now, I think Hamzat is, definitely one of the best in the weight class, and I think he's going to be the champion here soon. But outside of Hamzat, right, because he's not, Strickland's one, and then we have DDP. Adesanya, we're basically asking ourselves, is he still top three or is he not? I think that there's a good chance that he is, and this is the fight. This is a great opportunity for him to prove that he still has it, because I believe out of all the contenders in this weight class, Imavov is a good stylistic matchup for Adesanya. I know that Nassourdine has good wrestling. He's got good grappling. We see it at times. What's he going to go in there and chase takedowns against Izzy, for 25 minutes? What's he going to do with him? Lay on him? Nassourdine's going to get tired, right? That's what we've seen about Imavov. He's not this, juggernaut like DDP or Merab that could go in there and spam 50 takedowns and not get tired. He fatigues. He gets tired. He slows down on the feet. And if you're going to get tired with the grappling, you're going to gas yourself out. You're going to fatigue. You're going to be slow in front of Adesanya, who I can promise you, Izzy may get tired, but he's not going to slow down. He's going to keep he's fought in how many championship fights? He's won 25 minutes how many times? And I know at times Izzy has coasted through fights, right? Against Jared Cannonier, he coasted to a decision. The Marvin Vettori title defense, he coasted to a decision. I understand the critiques when it comes to Adesanya. Imavov is not going to allow Izzy to coast. He's going to get in his face. He's going to stand there and try to kickbox with him, because if Imavov mixes into grappling, could he maybe find a submission over Izzy? Possibly. I don't think that happens. And if he goes in there and chases takedowns, this is a 5-round fight. And we've seen Imavov be in 5-round fights. And yes, he does have these lulls and dips in the energy. Adesanya, I don't think that's going to happen. And if you're standing in front of one of the best strikers that we've seen in the sport, a guy who has a very extensive kickboxing background, I think that favors Adesanya. And given what we saw, it's not like he lost to Strickland, went out there and got destroyed by DDP and just looked like a shell of himself. He looked improved. He improved at this point in his career. His boxing looked money. He was digging to the body. He was landing good shots. And I believe that I've said this the moment this fight got announced. I came on here and reacted and said, out of all of the contenders, Imavov is a very winnable fight for Israel Adesanya, while Adesanya is also a winnable fight for Nassourdine Imavov because of the speed of Nassourdine, because of the wrestling and how good his skill set is. I believe he could absolutely win this fight, but I believe that the dangerous factor, it just is not there with Imavov, man. It just isn't. I know he landed a good shot on Cannonier, and I know he has moments where he hits guys with some good shots, but he's not in there really steamrolling anybody, man, And people are kind of talking about this guy like he is, and I absolutely think he could win this fight, 100%. I think this is 50-50. I could see Nassourdine finding a way to win. I could see Izzy, if he shows up, winning this fight. I believe Israel Adesanya, he lost to Strickland, he lost to Dricus du Plessis. I think he still has some left in the tank. He's almost 36 years of age. I know he's got some tread on the tires. He's a very, very good striker. And early on, he's very dangerous. The first 2 rounds is basically that window of where Izzy can get you out of there. I don't think he finishes Imavov because Nassourdine, he's very durable, he's tough, and he will keep coming after you. But I believe Nassoudine's going to slow down. I think he's going to slow down. I don't think he's going to have a ton of success in the grappling. While I think he has good wrestling, what's he going to do with him, right? I don't know that he's able to finish Izzy in terms of ground and pound or submission, so he's just going to fatigue himself, blow his arms up, and be tired standing in front of one of the best strikers in the sport. That's how I see this playing out if he tries to grapple, and then if he decides to stand and kickbox with Izzy, he's a pretty stylish striker. Those are the guys that Izzy does very well against. It's if you're Pineda to where you have that nuke that can land at any moment and get you out of there, or you have that awkward style like Strickland who moves forward and turns it into a boxing match and shuts down your kicks. That's not Nassourdine, man. He's not that style. He's that pretty stylish striker. Izzy does well against those guys, man. He's fought, he's had so many fights against guys that fight like that. So I believe this fight is a good matchup for both. I believe Izzy goes out there and wins a decision. I think it's a very close fight. I don't think that this is a one-sided, beat down by Imavov. I don't think it's a one-sided beat down by Izzy. I think this fight's very close, but at the end of the day, the guy that has been there and done that we've seen finish people, we've seen knock people out, we've seen him win decisions, and he's been in these tough matchups. He's been taken down. He has good takedown defense, right? I know Nassourdine has good grappling, but what he's going to do with the takedowns, that's where I question. And if you're standing in front of Izzy for 25 minutes and you don't have crazy power or this, I know Nassourdine is a very good striker. I don't think he outstrikes Izzy, man. Don't think he outstrikes Izzy. Like I said, I could see either guy winning this fight. This is a great matchup, but I believe out of all of the surging contenders, this is the most winnable fight for Adesanya, and we're going to find out if he still has some gas left in the tank. I think he does. I think he is able to get the win over Nassourdine Imavov by a very close decision. I could see it maybe being split, or, it's going to be a very close fight. It's not going to be lopsided, in my opinion, either way. I'm rolling with the former champ and Israel Adesanya. I think that he is able to get it done. I just haven't seen that danger factor from Nassourdine Imavov, and that is how you beat Israel Adesanya. Is an awkward, funky style, man. Look at DDP, awkward, funky style. Strickland, awkward, funky style. Imavov's that pretty, style of fighter. Izzy does well against those guys. So I think this is going to be a great fight either way. Great matchmaking by the UFC. Weird to see Izzy in a fight that isn't a pay-per-view headliner or in a title fight. I'm excited for it, man, either way. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.